My name is A.D. James. I'm the co-director of the Southern Hemisphere Space Studies Programme. So on behalf of the University of South Australia and the International Space University, I welcome the SH-SSP participants and guests to this public lecture on the role of ethics in space. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet here on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay our respects to elders both past and present. UniSA respects the Kaurna people's spiritual relationship with their country. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to Kaurna people living today. And I should also mention that this event and any of the public events through the programme would not take place without the generous support of our sponsors for this event, the Sir Ross and Sir Keith Smith Fund and Serafino Wines. So quickly on the schedule, I'm just going to go in a minute to the talk, which is going to be 50 minutes, and then at the end we'll have 20 minutes questions, and then we'll have refreshments outside. So I was just going to mention this event is part of the public outreach associated with the Southern Hemisphere Space Studies Programme. This programme was started in 2011 as a joint undertaking between the University of South Australia and the International Space University. The programme offers a 5-week intensive living experience, and during the programme, students learn about all areas of the space sector, from human exploration, space science, space applications, technology, business, management, economics, policy, and legal and cultural issues associated with space. The 2018 programme this year is the 7th to be delivered here in Adelaide, and it's also the largest we've had yet, with 50 participants from 15 countries and from many different backgrounds and different areas of expertise. And this reflects the International Space University ethos of the 3 I's: international, intercultural, and interdisciplinary. Anyway, that's not what you're here for. On with the talk. So I'd now like to introduce you to Dr Jacques Arnould. Dr Arnould qualified as an engineer in agronomy and forestry, and then continued his academic career with a PhD in the history of sciences. Not happy to rest on his laurels with one PhD, then followed this with a second doctorate in theology. And since 2011, he has worked in CNES, which is the French space agency, as their ethics advisor. His interests include the relationship between sciences and cultures and religions, with a particular interest in 2 themes. One of those related to life sciences and evolution, and the second, the subject of this evening's lecture, on the relationship between culture and the conquest of space. So if you could please join me in welcoming Dr. Arnould.
Thank you, and thank you, Andy, for this nice presentation. Thank you for this new occasion to meet you, meet again the student of SSP, and meet you, guest of this night. It's not easy to share with you my this experience to be the ethic advisor in CNES, because ethics is not easy to define, and we have this exercise 2 days ago at the same place. But before beginning, I want to give you some breaking news concerning space. First, you probably know, because you are living in Adelaide, or some of you are living in Adelaide, that last October was in Adelaide a very important event. Each year, all the community of space around the world met during a conference, international conference, and the last one was in Adelaide. And during this event was informed the creation of the Australian Space Agency. And it's a very big event for you in Australia, but also for everywhere around the world, because we need every country, every place where people are engaged in space to organize space in the future. Yes, I like this very nice comics, because you know that the question of reusable rocket is the question for the future, and probably that Australia, as it is explained here, has something to learn to the rest of the world. During this time, a French astronaut was in space. Thomas was the last French astronaut to be in space, and he offered a lot of pictures of the world. And at this occasion, in France or in Europe, we rediscover the interest of public for a space activity, for astronaut activity, and first for Earth. Because one of the missions of space is Earth, as you know. During all this time, always concerning breaking news, we have some activities. Especially with the new space activities and with Blue Origin in with the last test before the first probably tourist activity with Blue Origin, or in few days the testing for the new launcher for SpaceX, the Falcon Heavy. In Europe, we have the preparation of Ariane 6, and for the future, you know, as me that Elon Musk present again in Adelaide the project to colonization of Mars, or the first mission to Mars, human mission to Mars. So we have in space always between dream and reality for a long time now, perhaps for the time of the human story. And the question is how to arrive from the dream to the reality. And perhaps it's a reason that for me, ethics is necessary to prepare the future of space. And I try to explain you or to convince you today that it's necessary to introduce this ethical interrogation. The first question, it was a question during my last talk on Friday, is what is ethics? And as Andy explained, one of the particularities of ISU is to be, you see, international, interdisciplinary, and intercultural. And trying to define ethics in this context of intercultural, international, interdisciplinary is not easy. Ethics depend on your own culture, your own disciplinary, your own nation, or your own experience. So trying to find a common definition of ethics is probably quite impossible. So we have to find a very short definition, and probably, as I mentioned before, and I repeat today, a very good example of ethical attitude or ethical interrogation is given in this report coming from the NASA or the US government a few years ago. And the main idea is in this sentence. We explore to reach goal, not destination. Or we have to have a clear understanding of why it was chosen. The why question is probably a good definition of ethics. And that's the reason ethics is necessary to prepare the future of space, of the future in general. Asking the why question. Why we decide to do something? Why you decide to join to this conference? It's not only a destination. Yes, it's a very nice place, Mason Lakes. Perhaps you find to visit the lake before or after, but it's not enough. I hope that you have another goal, and perhaps to share this during this conference some idea concerning space, or trying to find some answer concerning your own question about space. So, why? The why question is a good way to define or to apply the ethical interrogation, the ethical definition. Sure that ethics is linked with law. And the student here, or perhaps you, have some idea that space law is a reality. A lot of people ignore that. When you ask them what is in space concerning law, for a lot of people, space is outlaw. You can do what you want. And if you have the possibility to go in space and do what you want. No. Since a long time now, we have space law, we have space treaty, we have space agreement, one of the examples on the screen now. And it's very important because law is the first application of ethics. When people try to answer the why question, the second question is how we conduct our goal, and how means or need law. What's the frontier, the limits, the way to act in space. And that's the reason that since 50 years we have law in space. International law or national law. Probably in the future, as a space country, Australia has to introduce international space law in your own national law. And it's very, very important. Again, even if space seems very far from us, more than 400 kilometers above us, we need law to conduct our activity now and in the future. So never forget the link between ethics, why I choose to do something, how I choose to do this thing, and the connection with the law, the present law, or the law in the future. So, why are we going to space? That's the first ethical interrogation. And it's a very easy answer possible because it is there. You know, perhaps it was the answer of George Mallory, a British alpinist in the middle of the 20th century. He wanted to go to the Everest. He wanted to be the first to climb the Everest. And when people ask him, but why you decide to do that? He said, because Everest is there. And when you ask some astronaut why they decide to be astronaut, what they want to go in space, some of them say, because space is there. It's not a stupid answer, because in our own human existence, space is a sort of evidence. Cosmos is a sort of evidence. Sky is evident. It's above us. And we can say, I want to go there, because it's there. If you enter more in this question, why we are going in space, you probably can introduce a sort of biological fascination for sky. As Andy mentioned, I have some interest with biology. And I always say, before being human, we are biological beings. And the fascination for sky, the fascination for light, the fascination for the balance between night and day is belonging to our biological existence, biological condition. Sometimes I try to ask ethologists, what do you know about the fascination of animals for sky, for what we name space? It's not so easy to test that, but it probably exists. And I find this example not in science, but in art. In this sculpture of one monkey fascinated by the sky. I know it's only art, it's not science. But I can dream that even the monkey have some fascination for space. They don't have the telescope, they don't have a spaceship, but sometimes they use spaceship to go in space. So why? It could be this could exist in monkeys, this sort of fascination. In human culture, we have so many proof of this fascination for space. In the past, in the first proof of human culture, of human art, we have testimony of the place of the sky. Perhaps you know that in one of the most oldest caves in France, Grotte de Lascaux caves, we have this very nice picture. And one of the interpretations of this black point dot is a moon, in fact, a representation of the moon. Another representation of the sky, and when you try to find something in Australia, you can find this very nice picture of in China and other country. Always this proof of fascination. So why you are going in space? Because space is there. Space is in our culture. Space is in our mind. And flying in space, flying in the sky, again, belong to all our cultures. As I explained, I'm coming from Europe with an Occidental culture. We have a lot of myths as Icarus or other mythology, but in other culture, in other mythology, you will find so many examples of God, divinities, or angel, or flying beings. It's always this fascination for sky. We try to share the same existence as the gods. We try to go outside our terrestrial condition. So it could be a way to answer the why question, because it belongs to our human condition. But you can find other explanation of this indeed to fly in space. It could be the question of science. We are curious. We want to know more. And space is a place where curiosity could go and go and go all the way forward and never find some limits. So again, during all the human story, you can find proof of this interest for knowing more about sky, observatory, or some way to measure sky, or sometimes with very simple instrument, but at least with more complex instrument. And you have this little telescope of Galileo, and what we can name now the astronomical revolution at the 17th century. And it was in the science, but also for human history, a real revolution, when we discover that the sky, as we say now, is a universe. Sky is the same matter, has the same law as on Earth. So the possibility to join the sky is real. And today science is quite the same, always knowing more, using telescope as Hubble, or using in the future more precise telescope as James Webb. Science is a good reason to explore, to go in space. Another reason is a question of domination. One of a French inventor of aviation, Clément Ader, explains that who will be the master of heaven will be the master of the world. And it's a reality with space instrument, space capacity. And you know that if you can say that scientists are one of the father of space activity, the other father is the soldier, the military power. And today also, we have always these two dimensions of space activity. From one side, scientific activity, from the other, defense activity. And at least a possible answer of the why question is because space is now useful for our terrestrial activities. We cannot live today only a few seconds without using satellites. I remember several years ago, in the French Space Agency, we tried to promote space activity by saying it's not possible to live one day without satellites. But today it's not one day, it's per 1 second. Or we use satellites every time. So it's really important for our future, and it's a reason why we try to go in space, why we try to use space. What is future? Because my question was, my idea was, ethics is necessary to prepare the future. But what is the future of space today? Everybody has probably in his mind the term of new space. Yes, new space, by definition, is the future. What means new space today? In fact, the new space is not totally new. the spirit of new space is belonging to a very, not very old story, but quite old story. New space is coming from the United States today. It's coming from the spirit of the new frontiers, the spirit of the Far West, the spirit of the conquest of the continent, the new continent. And you know perhaps that at this time, during the 19th century, during the Far West conquest, the idea was to combine private and public interest. The challenge was how to establish a railway to travel inside this big continent of North America. And the young states, the young United States, was not rich enough to establish by only public money a railway net. So they asked private person or private society companies to help public to establish this railway transportation. And this idea to combine public and private was efficient at this time for railway nets, and today the idea is used to establish new space, and as you know. But another example, quite at the same time, or just after this American railway history, is coming from Europe with the first airline. The first airline company is now 1 century old. It was created by a French entrepreneur, Pierre-Georges Latécoère, and he also proposed to the French government a sort of combination between public and private. And it was what we name today Aéropostale. But what is interesting for me concerning the why question and the spirit of this time is what Latécoère explained just at the time when he created the first junction between France and Spain, and he explained to one of his pilots all the calculations show that it cannot work. There is only one thing to do: make it work. It's a sort of ingenious spirit. We can do. We tried to do, but we can do, and finally we did it. And it's something very interesting, because sometimes by the fact that we try to do, or we say we can do, we forget the goal, because we are so engaged in the fact to succeed that we forget the goal. And that's the reason it's important to introduce this, the ethical opinion, the ethical interrogation, maintaining the why question, maintaining a real consciousness of our goal, even when it's very, very interesting and enthusiasm. So today, New Space is a group of entrepreneurs, a group of visionaries, you know, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Greg Weiler, Paul Allen, Mr. Bigelow, James Cameron. Very interesting with James Cameron. You know what? Because first he's coming from Australia, I think so. Canadian, I don't remember. Okay, but Cameron is a producer of Avatar. And the movie Avatar is a very good example of how to mine the space, how to find new resources in space. And the question is how to, in fact, what sort of ethics, what sort of attitude we want to have in the future by trying to mine the sky or to mine space resources. And all these people constitute today, or the founder of the ISU, or one of the founder, another man you can meet in sometime in ISU, or a relation with people, with scientists as Stephen Hawking, and sure that New Space today is introducing a sort of new chapter in space activity, a new direction, a new spirit. And I have not speeches for everybody. Last year I read that it was quite 800 entrepreneurs, especially in North America, engaged in what we name today New Space. And again, with this spirit, we can do it, we did it. So why New Space, the question? Yes, probably because it's the spirit of a new race. You remember that 60 years ago, at the beginning of the space history, it was a race to the moon. And it was the dynamic of the first chapter of space history was racing the moon, arriving the first on the moon. And today, New Space has the same spirit of race. It's a new race to space, finding new reason, to go in space, new activities, new product. What is really very incredible, perhaps, what was quite incredible 10 years ago, is the enthusiasm around this activity, around new space activity. Not during the last conference in Adelaide or 1 year before in Mexico. It was incredible to meet so many people trying to attend the conference of Elon Musk. It was a sort of new rock star in space. And we never before see this sort of enthusiasm for space people. And what's the future? I'm not able to say or to have a precise idea, but I can evaluate today this new spirit arriving in space community, and I'm sure that ISU is introducing this spirit in the community. Why new space? As I mentioned before, why space with science or military or utilization of space capacity? Again, we find quite the same. We find this capacity of establishing new constellation or a new telecommunication and other service of space. What is probably new is the capacity or the possibility to introduce, to offer more touristic activities. Okay, even if today is only always a project or a dream. Space mining, asteroid mining is a very important project for the future with a lot of technical challenge, sure, and but also after that legal challenge or commercial challenge. And as I mentioned before, we can also heard some people as Elon Musk or other explaining that the next goal is to colonize Mars, and that's very interesting too, because again, a few years ago, the official person of space, in space agency, for example, don't speak a lot concerning Mars. It seems to be very far. And today, due to the fact of these new actors, it seems that it's not done, but perhaps it's not so far in the time. And that's a very interesting time to see the new inspiration in all the community, new or old, coming from this actor of new space. The question is, if you can find some answer to the why new space, another question is how new space. It's what I mentioned before, not only the why question, but also the how question. We know some modification in the activity of space. One example is here, something very concrete coming from a study for the future. First, what we are here today concerning the satellite activities, and you can find the official program, the commercial program, all what is development, or the dual use, military and civil utilization. And you see that in the future, due to the activity of new space, you have an evolution, and with more commercial constellation, from 10% to 35%, and less official program, less dual use, and less, or quite the same with the developing space. And the question is, what means for everybody this evolution of space by the introduction of new space, and especially the place of commercialization? Is it business as usual? It's a very important question for a lot of people today. And another question is, with the how question, is a question of risk. I mentioned that with a student few days ago, but sure that it's not the same when you are belonging to a public agency or when you are working for a private company, or if you are buying a ticket for space. You are not the same way to manage the question of risk. And I use this very simple summary of the situation. In the left, you have this very common way to present how NASA or public space agency are managing the risk. Failure is not an option. You remember the story of Apollo 13. Or the position of Elon Musk, failure is an option. If you don't have failure, you don't have innovation. And how to manage us very concretely, I mean with concrete people, with concrete engagement, with finance, is not easy. And especially if you heard Elon Musk explaining that occupying Mars is very dangerous and probably people will die. Okay. Are we always in the time of the explorer, the time of, exploration and the possibility to die for exploring space? Okay, we will see. It's a very good question to prepare against the future. At least for me, the main question is perhaps the question of alien. Yes, alien could be as in Avatar. If you decide to mine space resources, you find perhaps some alien, and you have to manage the fact that some indigenous people are occupy the planet you are decided to mine. It's this idea of the movie Avatar. And if you decide to establish tourism activities on another planet, as on Mars, you can promote this tourism on Mars by this way. The question is, how to manage the place where you are establishing touristic activities. We know today that on Earth, even on Everest, you have some pollution. How to manage the alien if the Martian refuse not only Yankee but tomorrow tourists? I know that it's a sort of fictional question, but we have to introduce this sort of question today, because tomorrow it could be too late if we have. If we don't introduce some frontier, some rules to establish tourism in space, even if it is in a long future. But alien is also on Earth. In a private enterprise, you have private interest, and sometimes you can forget that other people exist around you. And until now, as I mentioned at the beginning, space is providing common services to everybody. It's providing global services. And if you have more and more commercial activities, how to sustain free activities? For example, the charter, international charter, space and major disaster. This charter is offering to every country which suffer to a natural disaster or industrial disaster. Space agency engaged by the charter offer as soon as possible and free all the image they have to help these countries. And it's not only a good idea, but a really efficient idea. You can see on this, perhaps not so big, but all the activity of the charter between last August till a few days ago, and at the occasion of hurricane or you have hurricane, you have earthquake or flood, people can use, again, free, can use data coming from space. And what will become that in the future if you have first commercial activities and less public activities? It's for me, a real ethical question. Quite the same, not only with very punctual disaster, but if we need today to manage together the future of our planet, and we know that the knowledge about climate change and the capacity to manage the consequence of this climate change, a number of data is coming from space. And again, from one side, okay, using space to economic, to business, but how to maintain some scientific research, some scientific program, it's a real challenge for the future. Always concerning the alien, I mean the other also on Earth, is the fact that we have, by the progress of the technique, more and more information concerning each person on Earth. If I mention at the beginning Australia, I have to mention also my own country, and the place where I'm working today is Paris. This picture of the Eiffel Tower, the very classic part of Paris, was given by a spy satellite in 1964, a US satellite. At this time, it was totally secret. And to have this picture was only for a few people at the level of the American government. But 40 years after, you can find better image coming also from space, and for this picture on Google Earth website. So what was private or secret before is today totally public or accessible by everyone. And it was 40 years after, and this picture is better too, also coming from space. And we know that in a very near future, we have this sort of picture with very good resolution, not only one time, but each day with 1 meter or less as a resolution, each day renew, and not only to see the Eiffel Tower, but everywhere around the world. And that's a very interesting question. Some people say it's the end of the private life. We know that. Everywhere we are not only satellite, but also Google car and Google Earth and Google Street and Google Map, what you want, with picture from everywhere. And I don't know what is the future of our private life. But for me, the question is not only private life, it's also a question of responsibility. Because every among us know a lot of things of the other, the alien just behind you or very far from you. And this question of global responsibility has to be, we have to be very sensible to that. It's for me, one of the most important ethical questions. What we are doing today, when we know so many things about the other human being around the world, it's perhaps the first ethical question. Yes, Big Brother is not science fiction today. Big Brother is the reality of today. But we are, each of us is Big Brother today. So it's a big question. And how to manage liberty, how to manage security, it's an open and debated question. So we need values. Values not to stop the progress, not to stop the initiatives, not to say okay, we nothing more, but we need values to go forward. We need value to prepare the future. We need value to have some frontiers, some light in the night. I like this the image, and we say that is a street light effect. We need value not to use as this man, saying, okay, I find a value and I stay on my street light and never never leave the light to go out, to go in another place. But we need value to go from one place to the other. And it's what is the function of ethics or moral. Yes, I forget that. It's not easy. Sometimes you can find example of value in new space itself. I don't know if you know the sort of motto of Jeff Bezos. It's a very interesting in the Blue Origin as this sort of picture, and the motto is gradatim ferociter. In Latin, it's better. Step by step, courageously. And it's interesting to see that some value is coming from new space itself. It's not necessary to search outside, but coming from the experience of some people, from the spirit of some people, we can perhaps find some value, some idea to prepare the future. So it's not easy. It's coming from our human condition, our human situation. And my last picture, my last sentence is coming from Carl Sagan. It was 40 years ago, and during a Voyager mission, this picture was taken by Voyager. And as you can imagine, that's Earth in the sky. And at this occasion, Sagan explained that our human condition, our human situation in space, is a good school to recognize in the same time the humility of our condition, but also the courage we need to accept this condition and to go forward in the sky as Voyager, or in the human existence as for us. So thank you for your attention. If you are interested by some idea I try to share with you this evening, you can find some idea in a very interesting book from a friend of mine, Tony Milligan, Nobody Owns the Moon, Ethics of Space Exploration. I try to share my my own job in CNES in this book, Icarus Second Chance. And you are lucky because in this room today, you have my local editor, Hilary, and he published 2 books of me, Impossible Horizon, The Essence of Space Exploration, and at least God, the Moon, and the Astronaut. And it's always occasion try to explain what we are doing in the space community and concerning ethics and not only ethics. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jacques. That was excellent. We have about 20 minutes for questions from the audience. I would ask you to wait till the microphone gets to you. So have you got any questions, Dr. Arnould?
With, let's say, space law and all that, I take it it's going to be sovereign governments that will write it. And, of course, we need to get them all on board. Now, we know, especially like America, China, their ethical values are quite different. Okay, so if they write up the laws, they're going to have to cooperate. Where are they going to keep them and who's actually going to police them?
Could you repeat the last sentence? I don't understand.
Like, we're talking about the laws about space, and that. So, I don't know if they're written yet, or are they still writing them? If so, where are they kept? Are they kept in The Hague or wherever? Who's going to police the laws? And are they all done?
It's a good question because law is not an established thing. It's always in movement, in motion. So we have to use the actual state of law again to go forward. A good example is today with new space and the idea of space mining using space resources. In space law, it's quite clear. Space is a common good or common heritage. It means that it belongs to everybody, and you cannot use privately or to business the space resources, especially with celestial bodies. And what arrived 3 years ago, the United States decided that it's possible for American company to use privately space resources. It is in contradiction with space law. And what we can do, we say, okay, we abandon space law, or we enter in a time of debate, or sometime quite violent debate, between the two positions. From one side, the common position, common heritage position, and the other, the private, I can say, position, saying, okay, we want to do business with space resources, and now it's the time to debate it, to find a solution, and so to make also I hope to make an evolution of space of space law, so everybody can find some interest at least. But it's not easy, and it probably is always difficult it's more difficult to find common position in law than to find common position in technique. Another example, not in new space, but coming from a previous chapter in space history, is a very nice mission of Apollo Soyuz. During the Cold War, it was, easier to find technical solution to make this joint mission between Apollo and Soyuz than to go outside the Cold War and to find diplomatic solution to the conflict between two states. So we can. I'm optimistic by nature, But I see that in a context where you have some concrete things to organize, it's possible to find technical, legal, political solution if you have some people with this clear choice to find a solution. With New Space, we are always in motion, I hope, in this direction.
We have seen how colonization has unfolded on Earth. Based on that, what if at a point in the future, all the people on Mars got together and declared independence from Earth? And on Earth there are still countries, so no one country can grant them that independence. Are we setting ourselves on a path for intraplanetary, like on Earth, and interplanetary war by just thinking about colonizing Mars?
I hope so. You have the occasion, or you had the occasion to ask the same question to Sir Jim Dater, because it's very engaged in policy science and the capacity that we have by space, trying to imagine the future. And we don't have today a definitive answer to your question and the way to organize a future colony on Mars or everywhere. But we know that until now, everything is possible. But it's also a question of, it's an historical, it's introduced in history, in time. Sure that at the beginning you can imagine something totally independent after the first mission. But that's the interest to have time to prepare, because we can say, okay, the first step could be, and again, step by step. It's not immediately the final solution. And we can use, again, all the experience of collaboration, of cooperation in space. It was probably or it's always very surprising to discover how space obliged people to collaborate and to cooperate, and to not to ignore, but to do with the fact that we are different, but we have to work together. And probably that colonizing Mars or establishing colony everywhere in space is the same necessity. We can do that alone. So we have to establish cooperation, and perhaps that means independence of the Martian colony. But if it's independence, you know that on Earth that establishing arriving at an independent situation is never easy. We sometimes is by struggle, by violence. Perhaps we can avoid that in space. I'm not sure. I'm not a prophet. But again, never forget what we were able to do during the last 60 years in space. I mentioned Apollo Soyuz, and sure that the International Space Station is a very interesting realization between country today, and I hope in the future with more country. With country, we were not totally not at the same spirit on Earth, and even during very conflict time and recent time, you have cooperation enough in space to maintain this ISS. So never forget that, and use this experience to imagine the future of this sort of a realization as Mars colony.
Good evening, sir. Drawing the line between the space law and the ethics. So space law becomes obligation and mandatory for the signed members, whereas coming to the ethics, it may become optional. Okay, the members may accept or may not accept. How to impose space ethics to be obliged by all the space countries? Is there any mechanism? Thank you.
What we can impose, for me, is the fact that you have to interrogate yourself of your goal, your destination, the way you are acting. It's not imposing some position, but more imposing or proposing this interrogative posture. And that's the reason it's necessary for the future. And that's the reason, in fact, law is not easy to establish. It's not easy to impose or to act with, because it's, yes, law is an obligation. And law is directly linked with action or non-action. And it, again, takes time because we have to establish a common position, international position. For me, the fact that we arrived 60 years ago to a space treaty, 50 years ago, to a space treaty, is quite incredible at this time in the political context. That people from different countries, sometimes from different opposite countries, could arrive to a common position, a common law. It's not so. It's quite rare in the history to mention that. After, it's necessary to control the law, to control the application of law. Sure, that's not easy, and again to make this evolution. Ethics is only a proposition. Ethics is only take time, take some effort to interrogate yourself of what you are doing, why and how you are doing these things. It's more a philosophical position, but I think that you can be engineer with some philosophical attitude, or scientist or artist.
This is more of a theological question, but when we start colonizing other planets and maybe at some point find other life, what do you think is going to happen to religion? Do you think we're going to get rid of it, or we're going to carry it up with us to the stars, closer to God?
It's a very good question. In fact, it depends first of your definition of religion. If we reduce this idea to attitude, to practice, in my opinion, religious attitude or religious practice, and we see that on Saturday with the astronaut example of the Pope who blessed the astronaut just before the launch, or the fact that they have to watch the same movie as Gagarin, or you take the coin during the transport of the rocket, or what you want. In space, you have so many ritual or religious attitude that when we arrive on Mars, we find other practice, other attitude, but always religious attitude. So it's probably no real difference, because it belongs to our human condition or human habits. Another question is the contents. I mean the philosophical or theological contents of this religion, of this attitude. That is very probably more difficult to answer, but more interesting. Remember, when I mentioned the astronomical revolution at the 17th century, it was not only an astronomical revolution, a scientific revolution. It was also a philosophical and theological and religious revolution. Until this time, the idea was in Europe that humankind was the center of the universe, of the little cosmos, and everything what was important was on Earth and was humankind. And quite suddenly, by the idea of universe, by the using of telescope, we discover that the reality is not a little cosmos, is a big universe. And it was more confusing for people engaged in the religious attitude of anthropocentrism. And it was a revolution also in religion and theology. When people arrive on Mars in the future and try to think religiously outside the practice, they have also to introduce in their own theology the fact that, okay, we are living not only on Earth but also on Mars, and perhaps we are discovering new way of not only new way of perhaps other form of life, and so it will be some revolutionary situation also. I cannot say what, because it's fiction today. It depends on the religion. Some religions are more open to the possibility of other life, for example, than other. Buddhism probably is more open to the diversity of life than Christianism. Or this sort of differences probably will be more clear in this future than today. But for me it's very interesting, because I always like the sentence, one of the sentences of Arthur Clarke, the very science fiction writer, and he explained that a belief which refuses a religion, which refuses the reality, has no value. So it's in your not fiction, in the future you describe, it could be again a good test for different belief, for different religion, if they accept or not the reality, for example, of human on Mars, or perhaps the discovery of extraterrestrial life.
Hi. Developing countries, I come from Chile, which is a developing country, and we're highly dependent on the mining and export of copper, for example. But at the same time, we are the only countries who don't have a space agency or an opportunity to go to space. So where do you stand on the moral and ethical dilemma of pursuing the space mining career for developed countries, which would, on the one hand, take the only basically source of income from a developing country who can also not compete in space?
Thank you for this question, because for me it's one of the main challenging topic for the future in the discussion around this project of space mining. There's the fact that when I try to follow the discussion at the international level, I have the same question as you. People forget the terrestrial situation. It's only okay if we have the capacity to mine the moon, the asteroid you are going, and we make business, and it's only a sort of private interest, reduced interest, without thinking of the consequences on Earth, of other producer, other country. And that's the reason, even if I say we have to manage the evolution of law, this idea of common heritage, of common good in space, is very important to maintain, especially to enter in dialogue, in discussion with actual terrestrial situation, as you mentioned. It's not so easy. It's not so easy because the interests today are fiction, in fact. But if tomorrow the interest is great or the concurrence is important, I don't know what we are ready to do or what we are ready not to do. And so it's very important today to invest the debate about this project of space mining and to again, what is our value? Until now, we decide that space is different than Earth concerning the exploitation of resources. But the American initiative, the Luxembourg initiative could be dangerous, in fact, for country as your country or situations similar to your country. So I don't have, again, precise answer, but for me, it's one of the reasons to say it's very important to begin today to think about the future, because after it will be too late. So be engaged in this direction. And we can to imagine a future in space different of the present on Earth.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So please join me in thanking Dr. Arnould for a very interesting and engaging talk. Just before we disappear, I'd like to thank you for all attending tonight and hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. I'd also like to thank the programme sponsors. There's a long list here. I'll let you read it in your own time. There you go. And the event sponsors for tonight, Serafino Wines, the City of Salisbury, Serafino Wines and the Sir Keith Ross Smith Fund. These sponsors allow us to do these public events, but they also allow us to do other events. So I'd also like to bring your attention to a couple of more events that are going on later this week. Government, industry and university partnering in the space economy development, which will be a panel discussion here in this room. And then on 1st of February, Dr. Charlie Limeweaver talking about Are We Alone? In Search of Cosmology. But the other things that the sponsors allow us to do is we've been able to bring a couple of exhibitions into UniSA. So the first one is the Woomer exhibition that was in the State Library. That's currently in the UniSA library on the other side of the campus, which is open during the days out of term time. I'm not sure of the exact times on that. You might have to check the website. But if you didn't get to see it at the State Library, it's worth going over there to look at that exhibition. The other one, which is in this building, just as you go out on the door on the left, is a joint programme between the Museum of South Australia and the Museum of Design of UniSA. And it's basically some students have done their interpretation of an artistic interpretation of some of the images from cosmology from the European Space Agency. So all I need to do now is invite you out for refreshments just outside the door here and take the opportunity to have a look at that display as well. So thank you very much for coming.